Well, good morning, everybody. As you know, Fleetside has had a wee bit of difficulty with his audio, tr- trouble getting on with Millbilly last weekend, and he's traced it down to the fact that he installed a music software called Cubase. So hopefully he's in the process of getting that sorted. However, and hopefully we'll have him on for a chat soon because he wrote this particular article, which I'm going to share with you now. I've shared it with a few other of the the dream team that were with Millbilly and a few others. Um, so some interesting comments and feedback. But let me share with you the document that Fleetside prepared, and then we can take it from there. Hopefully that's come up. I'll just move me up to the top there, out the way. Okay, so Fleetside's Musings with a dash of Avery and Kennedy. 2nd of May, 2021. Alas, it has come to pass that I spend my days analyzing analysis, noting the discretion between sound analytic practice and the more prevalent facsimile that society generally cares to go with. Question: why on earth did you come to analyzing analysis? The short answer might be I can't catch a football. The longer version: I have come to find that as societies, we tend to analyze more to advantage than to truth. Although we learn in school the methodology for objective analysis and its underpinning scientific method, and therefore we intuitively know the difference between analysis that serve an interest and the more arduous task of truth seeking, we prefer to pander to interest. Quote here: the mark of a good theory is that it can explain in a coherent way all or at least most of the relevant facts and is not contradicted by any of them. A bad theory is one that is contradicted by some of the relevant facts. An outrageous theory would be one that is contradicted by virtually all the relevant facts. As I have discovered through the course of growing up, all too often, I might add, and particularly when it comes to questions of societal significance, the masses tend to park objective reasoning in favor of latching onto a facsimile of truth, one that is accepted under the ordinances of social etiquette. To let ourselves go there, we intentionally underplay or avoid some of the essential tenets of sound scientific inquiry. It's a little game we play with ourselves. The mainstream media provides an interesting glimpse into intellectual gaming. Here, the messaging is simply that what the masses choose to hear as part of their daily routine. It is not reality. And of course, invoking the name of science in the newscasts from time to time does not alter that fact. It would appear that the bridge from mainstream psychobabble to truth is a long one. Some notable distinctions between truth and soothing mainstream narrations are: one, mainstream media has an agenda while the truth does not. The mainstream biases reporting toward selling copy, whereas the truth is not for sale. Three, the mainstream story is to leave you fulfilled, whereas the truth can be harsh, cold, and unwelcomed. Four, the mainstream media ridicules alternative points of view, while truth embraces falsifiability. Within this game of reasoning, the calling of a journalist has evolved to what we witness today as more of the social engineer, or more recently, a policer of right thing. By extension, all of society's institutions and the minds of the public moral majority, the community, are skewed accordingly. As individuals under the typical circumstance, our critical thinking circuitry has somehow become disengaged. Within our busy schedules, we simply turn on the mainstream media to accept the spoon fed download, a narrative that has conveniently been prepared for us by others. Through decades of drinking the Kool Aid, most in society have become quite drunk. News has become akin to sports and entertainment, and along the way, we have lost any ability to think critically for ourselves. It seems safe to say, if you find yourself turning to the telly for your Intel update, you are indeed programmed. Guess they don't call it news programming for nothing. If you find yourself discomforted by the spin, you are probably straying into the territory of being a truther. For me personally, if I accidentally turn on the mainstream media, I am less and less sure where the commercials end and where the news begins. As a consequence of society's cavalier approach to truth, methinks we are now embarking on the deepest social metamorphosis in human history. It's almost too late. Learning this the hard way through a half century of analytic frustration ever since the JFK assassination escapades, I finally came to establish my own outlook on life, one based on analysis of analysis. Though this may well have rendered me an appallingly dull and boring individual, when the chips are down, I can at least maintain a reference on the truth. Fleetside, I would never call you dull or boring. Honestly, I wouldn't. Of course, for general community, the stakes are high. Ultimately, truth impacts society's ability to sustain itself on its founding principles: civil liberty, effective representation, freedom of speech, and security of law. As I have come to learn, these principles are an ideal worth fighting for. Without work to maintain integrity in our institutions, the natural course will degrade to fascism, our ultimate control, i.e., ownership by others. We can reflect on how current events measure up on the forementioned four principles that are essential to our prosperity and where our prosperity lies today. Questions. How do we analyze correctly? What does correctly mean? Who is to say who is correct? On my website, www.aoai.ca, I have attempted to set out a compendium of knowledge on analyzing analysis. This stuff is, quote, dry as toast, so approach with caution. Of course, long before I came to this earth, philosophers, logisticians, and scientists have developed frameworks for objective reasoning. These carefully homed frameworks formed best practices in structured debate, sound analytic investigation, and sound scientific inquiry, all sharpening our ability to seek the truth. By extension, if you want to avoid the truth, say to support a pre-positioned agenda, simply kick out any of the required analytic building blocks, anything that isn't in your interest, until your preferred point comes into focus. Then frame your argument as a slogan and repeat it until Kool Aid drinkers have had their fill. This is where weapons of mass destruction, axes of evil, climate change, climate denier, anti vaxxer establish the splines to guide societal orientation. The mainstream media then pushes the message, repeating ad nauseum while shunning those who are not drinking fast enough. Question. Whose mainstream media is it? How could they all be in on it? Since the days of World War One, recruitment, the media and Hollywood for that matter, have played a pivotal role in shaping the public mind for something someone else needs them to do. As with the tactics of the Rothschilds banking family, purchasing and consolidating public messaging outlets over a century ago, objective reasoning became too high a price for the average information consumer. The public drank accordingly, while its financially supported academia was busy adjusting our learning, it would seem the learned officials of academia are drinkers too. Questions. How do societies think? How accurate is it? A useful metaphor here is borrowed from navigation in our physical world. In charting a trip, we know that if we want to move between where we are and where we hope to end up, we can use one of those floating dial on a disc things we call a compass. As we consult our map, the compass's magnets that are tied to painted north and south indicators will align with the natural magnetic field of the Earth. It will point north. The problem is, of course, magnetic north and true north are not the same thing. We thus apply a correction factor to help get us to the right place. For societal navigation, what the public cares to think and the truth are two different destinations. While the average citizen proclaims truth, you will find their analysis habitually falls short to enable their greater quest to jump onto that bandwagon with everyone else. Through time, the mole majority proclaim a social etiquette, a right thing that is advertised as needed to protect the herd. This social etiquette translates into thinking protocols that divert our reasoning to society's preferred magnetic north. The divergence expands, the magnet intensifies, et voila, we all run down the rails together on that bandwagon. In fact, a strange side effect to this phenomenon is the tendency for many in our society to police others in adherence to right think. We need remember, being stupid is a choice. So we have massive herds of well-intended intending people moving forward in unison. I call this running with the herd. To solidify analysis that aren't running true. It seems this dimension of gaming the truth is innate to humans. It's always been there through human history. It is an unadmitted human condition. Otherwise, Plato and the boys would have been wasting their time. It's just that more recently, the public perversion has become blatantly obvious. I like to think of this bending of human rationality as a fables, something that society will inevitably autocorrect. When the danger of the illusion reaches a boiling point, we expect there to be a societal course correction to bring us to a more honest orientation. This is how the League of Nations got turfed. Others might argue that short circuiting truth to etiquette is a necessary part of human cohesion. Although there is something to be said for going along to get along, other entities outside of our society know of this weakness and play upon it to steer accordingly. Positioning protocols has become the centre's sport of choice since before the First World War. How do you think societies around the world mobilized in common on something they didn't naturally want to do? We like to think free and open societies revolve around we the people, and that we are the architects of our own evolution, that our institutions, such as our governments, our courts, our law enforcement, our academia, and our mainstream media, are firstly ours, and secondly support us in our quest. In that regard, our governments are to be the product of free and open elections, democracy. Our courts are to be seekers of objective truth, justice. Our law enforcement is to serve and protect. Our academia is to foster objective learning. Our mainstream media is to provide what we need to know when we need to know it, etc., etc. Amen. Questions. How do our institutions measure up to these ideals today? Are the experts in their fields more aware or simply further indoctrinated? Are the reward systems in these fields preserving truth or steering us to a benefit? I'm going with poor, indoctrinated, steering us to a benefit. Now, there are some in society that are open minded heretics that are too open minded, heretics who think outside the box beyond the ingrained protocol. These people, if left to objective thinking, could poke a hole in our happy bag of right think and spoil the whole thing. We have a term for these people: conspiracy theorists. This is how the likes of Corner, Corner, Copper, Copernicus, Copernicus, Galileo, and Darwin got their start, being brave and resilient enough to persevere and ultimately triumph over an entrenched dogma. To maintain the bandwagon on a path of intellectual subservience, we simply park theories that are outside our comfort zone by labeling them conspiracies. This trigger word gives us license to suspend discussions, to keep any ideas that may be competing with our social tranquility from spoiling the mood. As the reinforcing loop is established, the societal weakness grows exponentially. Some questions. Are the conspiracies that are are there conspiracies that are damaging the societal interest? Who are the conspirators? How could everyone be in on it? Tackling the last question first, we should clarify that everyone being of common mind does not equate to truth. It may merely signify that all of society's institutions are on the same bandwagon. Further, in our analysis of analyses, we should consider if society's institutions are not aligned on truth. Are they, coincidentally, not aligned in the same direction? Avoiding the word conspiracy, we should be asking: are our governments, our courts, our law enforcement, academia, mainstream media, and the moral majority in society all propagating the same misconceptions? What elements of objective reasoning, scientific inquiry are missing, and are they missing in common? Knowing that no wheel can run true forever, how do we explain the pattern of random variance producing a coordinated turn away from the truth? Is there a party that benefits from society's misalignment with truth? Is this party strong enough in reach and in influence to warp the gravity of the societal institutions? Would they act to benefit themselves at society's expenses? I think that if you choose to break free from the gravity of careful policed right think, to research sufficiently as a truther, you may find the answer yes to the last three questions. Where this is the case, would you trust these powerful elites to be selfless in their decisions, to be the objective and benevolent custodians of the public interest, while the public remains vulnerable to their porch lights on but no one's home state? You will notice on matters of world affairs, the facade painted for the privately engaged and wealthiest players on the planet is that of a philanthropist reaching into world affairs to do nice things, while lo and behold, expanding their wealth in the process. With society's penchant for bandwagoning, are central philanthropists simply influencing the message so that the cow will actually proceed to butcher itself? In my submission today we are at a state in human evolution where critical thinking rust out has caused our societal institutions to be warped beyond recognition. They are quite visibly imploding on matters of principle around the world. Question: whose government is it? With extensive external determinacy structuring our society's way forward, and with the extensive reach and influence of major private interests, your government is not really yours. Today's leadership have become the facilitating intermediary between directors from the center and our overindulging Kool-Aid drinkers. They are the product of extensive public programming. Ask yourself in voting, do you go behind the booth to vote your conscience, or is your conscience programmed and you go behind the booth to install the program? And if that approach to leadership positioning doesn't work, we have Dominion voting machines. Public institutions similarly evolve under the gravity and incentivization of the center. If you sit back to do an object analysis of their analyses, you would find the whole shebang is warped. The center's challenge is simply one of timing. Their departure from reality can't go too fast. Slow incremental incrementalism coupled to supplementary doses of Kool-Aid is the best way to produce a boiling frog. It is within the foregoing context that I would like to position the efforts of two prevalent truther communities. Attached here to are two examples of societal warpage, a micro example, the Stephen Avery case, and the macro example, and a macro example, the JFK assassination. With today's warped space, I could cite a number of other major society shaping events to further illustrate our need to more carefully analysis. However, we are no longer permitted to go there. The powers that be have had enough. So let me just say, he's been muted, eh? Look at that. Question: who should we blame for the misdirection? The bad guys that manipulate the public, the institutions that cover for the crime, or society itself that chooses to stand down? These bad guys are plentiful and have always been on the social landscape since the origins of civil society. Realistically, there is an ina- in, inalienable, inal, inalienable, I think I've got that right, I hope so, Fleetside's inalienable dog eat dog tendency in human governance. In analyzing analysis, we can unmask the perpetrators only to put in place new perpetrators. Our institutions are not legitimately permitted to operate in warped space, and in analyzing their analysis, we can certainly call them out on that. In analyzing their analysis, we can see that our society and its institutions, the whole kit and caboodle, are running in unison to protect something other than the truth. The problem for Joe Public is the bubble they have to protect. The argument cannot extend too far lest they crease the confines of their afforded mental landscape. At this point, discussions become heated. Logic reverts to emotion, and the discussion is over. Even as the truth train side swipes the bandwagon, society remains happy to ride the rails of comfort. Just one problem: the bridge ahead is out. As truthers go too far, it is fun to finally watch the bubble burst. Stephen Avery. This tale starts in a small town America, in a community called Manitowoc. Stephen Avery was wrongfully incarcerated twice. The second instance appears to be a doubling down of the system, a reaction to its misdeeds under the first incarceration. The Stephen Avery case has now gained notoriety internationally, growing tentacles that are testing institutional objectivity at the state level and drawing the watchful eye of truthers from around the world. While Steve's attorney and the truthers are merely pushing for access to further information on a matter that transpired well over a decade and a half ago, what has become most fascinating to watch is society's institutions drafting themselves into a counter offensive against anyone who would dare seek information. Government is silent. The courts are precariously navigating disinformation to keep that bandwagon on the rails. The mainstream media maintains allegiance to the system. There is no permitted voice for Stephen, nor for objectivity in analysis. Thus, the crime of making a murderer is being perpetuated as a current event. Some truthers advance theories of one individual or another having committed a murder, a random act, just at the right time, and with the support of all the right officials. Others point to the prepositioning of benefit, the attribution of value, and the large, expanding, and seemingly coordinated framework of institutional top cover as indication of, dare I say it, conspiracy. As the coincidence of the change in fortune for key system officials at the precise moment of need seems outside the pale, we need consider scenarios beyond random events. We ask ourselves who or what is adjusting gravity away from truth. Would, for example, Peg Leixelager have had sufficient means, motive, and opportunity to pull off a conspiracy that, for reasons yet to be uncovered, remains the modus operandi to this day? What is maintaining society's institutions, courts, government, mainstream media to within the vortex of malfeasance be explained, vortex of corruption? What implications does the truth pose for these institutions? Can the extending malfeasance be explained more simply as the larger system maintained in the bandwagon without the notion of a higher guiding hand? For those putting their faith in the legal system, thinking beyond the realm of the whodunit, we need to ponder this. How do we expect to use tools of legal integrity to triumph in a legal system that doesn't apply them? Without an objective legal system, is Stephen Avery a political prisoner? Looking past the courts, how does one best confront a political imprisonment? Some statusing questions are and proposed answers. Are any of the key institutions engaged in analytic bias? If so, which ones? In chronological order: law enforcement in two counties, mainstream media and including celebrity testimonials, the courts, the government. Are these institutions mutually reinforcing as if coordinated in that way? They maintain manipulations in common. They protect the same caveats in context, carve outs into context. The official narrative is repeated while avoiding obvious counter arguments. What is the form of manipulation of truth in order of impact? Unnatural logical conjecture, including violation of the fundamentals of physics, adjusting, destruction, suppression of information, conflict of interest, violation of due process as required in ethics and law, lack of integrity in documentation, recording, and management. Are there conspicuous subjects of enforced manipulation in order of effort? DNA identifier of the victim, details on identity of the vehicle. What elements of objective analysis are being violated? Objectivity of participants, falsifiability, objective consideration of alternative explanations, assessment of counter argumentation, transparency of arguments, counter arguments, integrity in actions, methods, transparency of investigation, sharing of information, sufficiency, integrity in record keeping, reasonable explanation of matters of interest, such as coincidence, suppression of alternative explanations. Cubon. Is there a party that benefits from the subterfuge in order of benefit? Local authorities, repast transgressions, and deposition avoidance. Political interests of the Attorney General for Wisconsin, past and present, organized crime, the club. What party, if any, would have sufficient reach to influence government, courts, law enforcement, and mainstream media? The club. JFK. This is a tale at the international level. Here we have a duly elected president that did not follow the externally command script. In one key example, Kennedy's decision to eliminate the Federal Reserve countered the power base of foreign central bankers. The official narrative featured a lone government, Oswald, who was conveniently offed in the process, enabling the system to close the file. Unfortunately, through truth analysis, we came to realize this official narrative officially defied logic and common sense. As the cabal inserted Arlene Specter's Warren Commission, magic bullet theory, the mainstream media played a vital role in mixing the Kool-Aid to protect the official narrative. The public can ask any questions as long as they don't go outside the narrative. Meanwhile, were the official narrative true, we would have to fire Newton and rewrite our physics textbooks around the world. And because society absorbed the fiction without adequate redress, JFK brother Bobby also needed to be shot by a lone gunman on his way to the White House in 1968. To this very day, our governments, our courts, our law enforcement, our academia, our mainstream media, and the majority in the larger society coordinate to vilify Oswald. Some status questions and proposed answers. Are any of the key institutions engaged in analytic bias? If so, which ones? In chronological order: FBI, law enforcement, mainstream media, the courts, Rowan Commission, the government. Are these institutions mutually reinforcing, as if coordinated? In what way? They maintain manipulations in common. The official narrative is repeated while avoiding conflicts of interest, impropriety of official duty, and generally accepting practice, alternative theories, known evidence. What is the form of manipulation of truth in order of impact? Adjusting, destruction, suppression of evidence, unnatural logical conjecture, including violation of the fundamentals of physics, conflict of interest in investigation, conflicts of interest in Rowan Commission participants, integrity of method regarding Rowan Commission findings. Are there conspicuous subjects of enforced manipulation in order of effort? Zapruder film, adjusted, suppressed physical evidence, files locked away for 50 years, adjusted, suppressed eyewitness testimony, coincidental deaths of eyewitnesses. What elements of objective analysis are being violated? Objectivity of participants, Rowan Commission cronies, falsifiability, objective consideration of alternative explanations, assessment of counter argumentation, transparency of arguments, counter arguments, integrity in actions, methods, transparency of investigation, sharing of information, sufficiency, integrity in record keeping, violation of due process as required in ethics and law, reasonable explanation of coincidence. Jubon, is there a party that benefits from the subterfuge in order of benefit? Central bankers, CIA, FBI, organized crime. What party, if any, would have sufficient reach to influence government, courts, law enforcement, and mainstream media? Central banks, central bankers, CIA, and FBI. So there you go. That's a an article that was sent to me by Fleetside. Thank you, Fleetside, for putting that together. It does raise some interesting thoughts. Um, I must admit, I particularly when it comes to Manitrock, as you know, I've been hugely critical of the media, um, and I know that for Fleetside, living over the border in Ontario, it would seem that one of the benefits of being Canadian is that in certainly a lot of Canadian news reporting, it's far more accurate, unbiased. They tend not to just simply parrot what the state said in Stephen Brendan's case. Anyway, as I say, hopefully we'll get a posse together, if you like, to discuss further with Fleetside. Hopefully, Fleetside has got his sound issues resolved. Anyway, we'll catch you again soon. Take care. Bye for now.